It says, what should go into the introduction of the literature review? Should it make reference to the aim? Well, the introduction to the literature review could make reference to the aim of your study and how you seek to approach that review. So that there's, yeah, it's a brief outline as far as the introduction is concerned of what you propose to do in your literature review. And you can make reference to the aim as well. Can you state that your approved study design was a limitation? For example, a case control study would have been better than a cross-sectional study. Well, it's possible that your study design may be a limitation, but the question is that the best study design should have been dealt with at the methodology level. I agree, fair enough, sometimes there are circumstances that come unexpectedly. So if from what you've done, you think that the design of the study was a limitation, you could state it, but then you must have a very strong reason for doing that, especially when you yourself have used that particular study in your research. You have to mention the strength of your study as well. Yes, I mean, you don't have to just talk about the negative aspect in terms of the limitation. If your study has particular strengths, you can elaborate on them. Because if they are genuine strengths, they add to the value of the study. What is the place of a summary or abstract, and what is the recommended format? Well, like the proposal, the dissertation also has to have an abstract. And the college usually requests for a structured abstract. Yeah, so there must be, if like a background, then the aims and objectives of the study, the methodology, and a brief outline of the methodology, the essential results that came out of the study, and then the conclusions. So an abstract or a summary is essential. Some places don't require a structured abstract, but I think the college requires that the abstract is structured.
Yes, so I think you addressed the question. So the abstract definitely has to be a structured one. I think that's what it is. And the word limit for that is in the guidelines. There's something in the comment about the preferred reference style.
Yeah. I think it's a Vancouver style that we use in the college.
Right, Professor, there's another question there saying, how many aims and objectives should be included in the dissertation? Can there be one aim and a set of objectives? And then, is a pilot study acceptable for a dissertation? And is there any calculate sample size for this?
No, it's difficult to put a number on these things, but generally you state the aim first, and the aim should, and generally as much as possible, it should be one aim in either a sentence or a short paragraph. And then we have a set of objectives. I mean, if most of the time, no more than 3-4 objectives would be okay. Yes, certainly. Quite often we expect that in your study, you may carry out a pilot, because a pilot would offer you the opportunity to see how easy it may be to use the instrument. It may help you to identify problems that you may not have anticipated. And so it's important. I mean, generally, a pilot study is useful before you carry out the main study. So yes, you don't need to calculate the sample size.
Professor, could I please make a comment on the pilot study thing?
Yeah.
I think if the question is suggesting that the pilot study is like the main thing for the dissertation, then I would say no.
No.
Okay, will you agree with that?
Oh yeah, a pilot study is not the one for the dissertation.
Yeah. And some people do pilot studies where they are basically like doing, it's a fishing thing to find out what the problem is. And we wouldn't recommend that for a dissertation, because then you are basically risking getting many people querying what you're doing. So it's best to do a study that's filling the gap, like Prof. Ncheche said, rather than doing an exploratory thing, which is a pilot. So I guess that would address the sample size calculation thing. If you're doing a pilot study, you really don't need to do a sample size calculation because it's a purely exploratory thing, but that shouldn't be the main thrust of the dissertation. Thank you.
And the size, the sample size for the pilot doesn't need to be a huge one. I was reading a proposal and said they are going to use 50 people, participants for the pilot study. Why 50? When you can use between 20, 25. So yes, pilot studies are important, but as director has pointed out, you don't use pilot studies for the dissertation.
There is a comment in the chat that I would I'll talk about. The comment in the chat is the 120-page minimum for the dissertation seems to be on the high side, and that could push people to include results which may not be very relevant, and also to be unduly verbose in certain sections. Yes, there've been in response to that, there have been concerns raised about the 120-page limit that's set by the college on the guidelines, and that is being reviewed. We are reviewing it currently to a word count, because we've looked at the different dissertations, and we see that the lowest in terms of word count we've got around 11,000, and the highest in terms of word count a little over 20,000. So we are going to come out with a word count range that excludes the appendices, the tables, and all that, which would come from what we've essentially seen that has been coming. So the page limit thing is going to be revised. So that's a comment on the page limit. I can't see any other questions.
How should tables be presented, without lines or with lines? Well, usually.
I don't think that much. Okay, please go on.
No, Richard, you go ahead.
Now, I was going to say that I really don't think that it's a question of style in terms of lines, and we haven't stated particular formats for tables. I know some journals actually tell you which kind of table format to use, but I don't think we have any particular one. I'm over here. What do you say to that?
Yeah. I mean, some journals would clearly specify the format for their tables, but others don't. But I think that for the college, we haven't specified any style, have we? Not that I am aware of.
We haven't. Yeah.
Says, on the subject of potential publication of a dissertation as a peer-reviewed article or even a book, is there a place for including such planning in the overall research planning? At what stage should such planning start? Who is best to guide in such situation? I mean, it is expected that whatever dissertation you produce, you would eventually produce an article for presentation to a peer-reviewed journal. And usually what happens is that in the proposal, there's a paragraph that talks about dissemination of the research outcomes. So you can indicate that in addition to other things that you can do, the results will be presented to a peer-reviewed journal for consideration for publication. And at what stage should such planning start? Well, I personally think that when you are doing you are carrying out your dissertation, it should be your aim right from the beginning that you want to produce material that can be published. So right from the beginning, it should be part of your thinking. And who is best to guide in such situation? I'm not sure I understand that question, because how I understand, my understanding is that, right from the beginning, you and your supervisor would aim to produce such good work that a publishable article can come out of it. So to me, that should be everybody's aim when they are working on their dissertation.
Yes. So, Professor, please, just to add to that, I would say that what we would really like is if every single dissertation resulted in one or more peer-reviewed publications. And that's what the Vice Rector said the other time, that we're trying to put out some support that would help encourage people to do that. But this should be the aim of every trainee, and we as supervisors should encourage the trainees to do that. And I think it's a supervisor and trainee combination that does that. Now there's a comment at the bottom about, is it accepted by the college to have a table and present the same data as a graph? I think Professor Yawson addressed this the last time, that is definitely not good practice. It's not good research practice anywhere at all, that you have a thing in a table, then after the table, you have a graph also showing the same information. And then to make it even worse, you get into the text and you describe the same thing again. Prof. Yawson clearly stated that yesterday, that is bad writing style and nobody should do it. So it's not acceptable. You have a table and then you have a graph on the same thing as well. Right.
There's a question in presenting participant demographic data. Sometimes comparisons are made between males and females, adding p-values. If the study objectives do not include this comparison, should this be added to the results? Look, quite often social demographic data is just to describe the sample. And if you are not looking at two different groups of study, then doing this analysis of comparing male and female is of no use. If you yourself say that the study objectives do not include this comparison, and this happens quite a bit. The study is not to compare, there's no comparison in the study as far as the socio-demographic characteristics are concerned, and yet they will take one socio-demographic characteristic and compare between one factor or the other, when the research objectives don't make such comparisons necessary.
I think that's that. There's another thing that I'll talk about. It says it says when pre-testing a questionnaire, must it necessarily be done outside the intended study site? I would say yes. I would say yes. You don't pre-test your questionnaire at the same place where you are doing the study. So if you pre-test it in a similar place, and the pre-testing, you may just do it with like with say probably about like 10 or so people. It's to identify problems in the tool that would need to be addressed. So there are two more questions here, and I hear there are some hands up. So then we'll go to the hands that are up. There's a p-value of less than 0.000 have meaning. Yes, it does have meaning, but then we mustn't write it that way. When you do an analysis that gives you a p-value of 0.000, let's take what is here. It should be reported that as the p-value is less than 0.0001. Yeah, and my teacher, the person who taught me this is the one presenting. So, Project, you see, I still remember that. So you don't write the p-value of less than 0 equal to 0. You make it less than 0. You go one decimal place more, 0.0001, less than that, and that's the meaning of that. And the referencing guidelines are going to be will be clarified. It's a Vancouver system that we go for, and I think that's what the current guidelines refers to the number superscript and all that, but we essentially just take the Vancouver one, and then the reference manager, the different referencing software, get that going.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Okay. I'm going to bring up something which is very sensitive, but we've been murmuring about it in the background, and I'm bringing it up so that we can see how it can be addressed. So you said that early on in the process, whilst you are developing your proposal, involve the statistician, but a trend has arisen over some years now that the statisticians are asking residents to pay them huge amounts of money to help look at, to help them with their work. And the first time I heard it, I was totally shocked because it even goes into thousands of CDs. So, yes, we are, like has been said, we all have some degree of knowledge about statistics, but we are not necessarily experts. And so it is useful to have someone who is better versed in statistics to also look and say, this and that. But it can be a discouragement to people to even do that if they are having to pay out huge amounts of money for that.
Yeah, Prof. Guka, thanks for talking about this, because this is actually one of the big unethical things that are happening with research work, not only at the college, it pervades into the universities as well, where people essentially are not making use of any basic statistics that they have. They take the statistics classes and then they shelve the statistics classes, and then when they collect the data, they go hire a statistician, and the statistician essentially does analysis, some of which doesn't even really make sense in the light of the objectives, and then pay some huge amount. And when they come to the exam and you ask them about specific things, it's totally not there. And this thing is totally wrong. Nobody is asking for number. And the sad thing is that, and I'll even go and name it even more. The sad thing is that some of the people who are actually offering this service and charging money are faculty members, of the universities that we are in. And at least I haven't heard any name who I'll say is a fellow of the college. But the faculty members of the universities that we are affiliated to, who are doing this, which they shouldn't do. The thing is that, to address this, the college, like we said, is going to provide courses on basic research methods. And that is all that we kind of expect our residents to do. What Prof. Ncheche talked about consulting with a statistician, Prof. Ncheche is not talking about encouraging those mercenaries. And I think what he's saying is that there should be a discussion with somebody who understands statistics, probably at a more advanced level than you are, which could be the supervisor or some colleague, to kind of understand what is the right statistics to go by. And one of the things that we'll do is to provide, this kind of resources. There's a question of the statistician be willing to do it on time for free. And my response is, statistician doesn't analyze the candidate's data for them. The candidates analyze their own data. That's what it should be. This is kind of like walking into an office and asking, I mean, what test should I be doing? And when we look around and put the resources together, which is what we haven't done, we'll realize that there are enough people within our fold who can give this basic information. I mean, there are many people I know, I mean, who've done their research, and basically they had a consultation with somebody who knew some statistics. But in terms of the analysis, they did the analysis themselves, entered the thing into EpiInfo or SPSS and run those tests. And that is the kind of, let me say, empowerment, for want of flogging a political word, that will need to give, that we are going to work to give our trainees, so that they can do this basic analysis on themselves and not by themselves, and not go hire these mercenaries. So we will work on that and get it out. It's a big problem all across, where people are turning out to work. And if you really get down and quiz down the statistics, they really don't have a clue what they've done, when they could have just done, I mean, simple tables, do a chi-square test of association, do a logistic regression and report the odds ratio. And any of us can do that. Any of us can do that and interpret it well. It's just a question of getting the training and going through it. And we're going to address that. Referred to, statisticians can be given honorarium by the college. Now I'm going to be my dictatorial self. We're not going to pay any statistician any honorarium. I mean, the residents, our trainees are bright enough to be able to analyze their data and get good things out. And we are going to address that. We are not going to recruit any statistician and give honorarium. If there's anything like honorarium, it's what we give to supervisors, and we'll put a team together, like one thing that Conrad suggested, where it would be an advisory team for a research clinic, not somebody who's going to analyze data for them. I'm sorry, but I really feel very strongly about this. And those mercenaries, I think I should stop now before I expose myself. Prof. Parkins, hand this up. Patrick, please give her a live mic.
Can I make a comment on the issue? Yeah. So far, all the dissertations I have had the privilege to look at, if we all understood basic statistics, we'll be able to do our work without suffering at the hands of the so-called mercenaries. When I said that you need to consult a statistician, you could have somebody in your own department who has enough knowledge of statistics to help you. And I would wish that each of us would understand enough basic statistics to do some of the simple things that have to be done, and consult statisticians for the more difficult things, which are very few and far between. So that's what I would say.
Well, I'd just like to assure the House that we're going to work on this, and we're going to have sessions with the residents also, and kind of like let them know the level of statistics that's required in what they do, and just let them know that all of them can do it. So if somebody chooses not to do it, then it's laziness, and in that case, I mean, it becomes something else. But the very basic thing, we're going to get them to that point where they'll be able to do it. Right. So now that my blood pressure is back to normal, Professor, thank you for thank you for this presentation.